Welcome to this edition of Diligence Inside America's Boardrooms. I'm TK Kerstetter, and I'll be your host for today's show. Today, we're going to be talking about board oversight's components of an effective stakeholder capitalism model. And joining me is somebody that has put a lot of thought into this particular topic. And it's a topic that needs a lot of thought because we're all trying to sort it through. But welcome Brad Oates, who's a board member with CIT. He's also chairman of Stone Advisors. And I actually know him best as the former offensive tackle for the Kansas City Chiefs and the St. Louis Football Cardinals. So, Brad, it's good to see you again.
Great to be with you, TK. Thanks for inviting me to be part of your show.
Stakeholder capitalism. It's sort of the buzzword of what's going around these days, and it's forcing people to think through a lot of this. So I know you have, and your think tank has given some thought to this. So tell us a little bit about how a board should approach this and sort of adopt this shareholder capitalism within their system.
Great opening question. I think one of the first things that a board should do is make sure that they understand the word stakeholder capitalism and have a unified definition. I found in this governance space that words matter and the context matters. So not assuming that everybody has the same common understanding. So what I would offer is this: one way, not necessarily the only way, not even proffering as the best way for all companies. But I see stakeholder capitalism having three elements. One, that stakeholders, the six classes of stakeholders. Many people have five, but I have six, which is customers, shareholders, employees, business partners, primarily mission critical business partners, the government and regulators, and the community, local, national, and global. And the idea of stakeholder capitalism is what kind of relationships does the company have with each of those five? Typically, the capitalism part is all about a business model. You can think about a business model in the what and how somebody provides products and services to a market. But I like to look at it as a little bit broader, which is it's really the corporate mission, strategies, and execution plans to provide value. Provide value not just to customers, but a business model that is profitable enough, the capitalism part, to also enable a company to provide value to all other classes of stakeholders. An important point, not that they're trying to provide the same or equal value to all stakeholders. And then the last thing for stakeholder capitalism is a grounded governance model. This is probably the area where we have yet to really conquer in the governance world, of a model that, in the way I like to think about it, is what are the corporate purpose, the values, and the vision of the company, and does the governance model governs the business model to stay within that governing framework of purpose, values, and vision?
I would agree with you. I'm not sure that people have formalized that governance either into a model or into a plan, but I think if we sat down, we would all be pretty much on the same page of what those governance issues are. It's just hard to have it formalized.
For me, what was helpful in a light bulb moment is to think about governance from a shift from tactical governance about the traditional committees and processes, strategic governance. And what really occurred to me is at the end of the day, a company to be successful needed to have three fundamental things, three fundamental strategies, if you will. A competitive advantage strategy. What is it that allows them to be a successful capitalism model? Ethical, profitable, competitive advantage. The other thing that certainly in 2020 came out, which is organizational resiliency. What is the resiliency of the company to withstand business model disruption risk, natural, man-made, cyber, and a whole host of risk, including market obsolescence risk? And last may well be the most important thing, and that is stakeholder relationships. How does a company build and maintain high trust stakeholder relationships. And if you step back and think about it, competitive advantage would be, in our sports world, offense. The organizational resiliency would be defense. And this idea of stakeholder relationships is that intangible that all championship teams have, that cultural glue that pulls a team together and has them exceed performance expectations, not just meet them. So those are the principles that I've tried to incorporate into this idea of a governance model that can govern effectively a business model that's capitalism, but ethical and sustainable capitalism.
Brad, how would, first of all, I understand that you say, in thinking this through, that this isn't the only way, and that you're trying to, again, put your arms around this topic, because at this point in time, it is all over the place, and particularly when we look at the factors of ESG. But how would you suggest that a company go about building sort of an effective stakeholder governance model that does bring value?
Yeah, I think that's the heart of the question, isn't it? And I'm not proffering anything that I would consider easy solutions. There is nothing easy about this. But I do think that you can distill it down into a three-step process. One is setting the foundation for stakeholder capitalism. I think of that in three ways. A corporate purpose. I'll call it a stakeholder corporate purpose. Not just a PR purpose, but something that truly all of the governance leaders, both board and management leaders, would buy into and are committed to. Then values, and not just some simple PR related values, but stakeholder relationship values. What is it that is going to be a unique value for the shareholders, for financial trust versus the business partners' collaborative trust? But this idea of trust, I think, is the heart of that. And then vision. I look at it very simply to the sports world, which is the vision is to become a championship team, become best in class. It's really what I call really the best in class. That standard, if everybody is shooting for that standard, once that standard has been set, that raises the competitive bar for everyone else to exceed. That's really the idea of healthy competition. Unfortunately, capitalism has taken a backseat and is looked at somewhat negatively, whereas I think we have to change the conversation that says, now, wait a second, this is about setting the bar for what a best-in-class company is, so it raises the playing level of play for everyone else on the field. So once that foundation is then set, then I think the capitalism model, the idea of a corporate mission, I look at very simply. A customer-centric mission, a mission to provide best-in-class value to customers, is a stakeholder mission. Because if you do that well, the company then is able to provide value to all other classes of stakeholders. But I think it's important to make that measurable. So the corporate mission, I ask people, what's not just the mission, but the mission outcome? What's the measurable mission outcome? An example might be customer satisfaction score or a net promoter score. That then drives the strategies and the execution plans. If that second step is done right, we'll call it the capitalism model, the business model. Then the governance model. And if you think about it, the three elements of governance should parallel the three business strategies. Competitive advantage governance. How do governance leaders ensure that the company has sustainable, profitable, and ethical competitive advantage? That idea of business model differentiation, innovation, human intelligence, all factor there. Then organizational governance. How does a board and management team ensure that a company is resilient to these formerly risks? There is no such thing as a black swan risk anymore, as we have found out. but really resilient people, resilient business model, resilient in multiple dimensions. And this last idea of stakeholder relationships is probably the area that board members spend least amount of time on. I would dare say that if you ask most board members to ask them how much do they know about the underlying trust strength of the company's relationships with each of those 6 categories, maybe 2 would get high marks. And I think an idea of stakeholder capitalism has to include, perhaps the time has come to include a stakeholder committee, a committee that's chartered to, just like the audit committee, the Nom and Gov and risk committees, that is chartered to understand and oversee the trust strength of the relationships that the company has with each of those classes of stakeholders. And I think that is something that I would proffer, that if you want to get serious about stakeholder capitalism and use ESG as a way to build the relationships, each of the E and the S and the G are really relationship components for each of the 6 classes of stakeholders.
I suspect that any company today that has a corporate planning or a strategic planning board committee, that would be an easy fit to move that into. There's still always debates about forming extra committees and manning those committees and how many people you need on the board. But I think all your comments, Brad, certainly makes sense. Having a board make the commitment to spend the time on that, I think, is going to be the biggest challenge. And we've only had the chance to just sort of wet people's beak by sort of the thought process here. I'd like to point out to our viewers that on June 29th, you will be conducting a more detailed review titled A Best-in-Class Governance Model or Stakeholder Capitalism, which is a webinar being put on by the American College of Corporate Directors. So if anybody wants to understand more of this in detail, June 29th, you can look that up under the American College of Corporate Directors. So, Brad, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us, and good luck with that webinar coming up.
Thank you, TK. Appreciate it.
And that will conclude this edition of Inside America's Boardrooms. We hope you enjoyed the show. We'll be back again next week when we take another look at a critical topic that'll help you be a better board member or committee member. So we'll see you then.